Hi, everybody, and welcome to Headway, a show that aims to inform our audience about current political issues that affect the local area, the region, and our nation. The Massachusetts primary elections for both Republicans and Democrats are right around the corner. For the rest of the summer, I will interview candidates for the 4th Congressional District of Massachusetts. For this episode, I'll be chatting with Democratic candidate Chris Zannetos, an entrepreneur and educational advocate. All right, guys, welcome back to Headway, and today we're here, like I mentioned in the open, we're going to be speaking with Chris Zannetos. How you doing, Chris?
I'm doing great, Dave. How are you?
I'm doing great. So can you start off just giving me a little info about your background and why you decided to run for Congress?
Sure. So look, I am not a politician. I'm a tech entrepreneur. I've started 3 companies here in Massachusetts, creating hundreds of jobs for people and actually about $250 million of salary for folks here in Massachusetts, and also hundreds of jobs around the rest of the world. I'm also a founder of a nonprofit that is focused on making STEM education and the opportunities it creates more accessible to people from marginalized communities, people from lower and middle income communities, et cetera. And I was not planning on running for Congress, but really I felt compelled to. I went to see the candidates speak, and they're all good people and they've done really good things. But I felt that there was a huge piece of experience that was missing. And that is that in an era when our economy is serving only 10% of our population and everyone else is working so hard just to stay afloat and try to get ahead, we had no one in the race who had any experience creating jobs, any experience with the tech world, which is driving our economy. And as I looked at it further, there are only 6 people in Congress who have any experience around these areas. And so I really felt, especially now with the pandemic, where we have to grow out of this economic crater, I felt it was really important to get that sort of experience down to Washington for the people.
Yeah. I mean, it's really apparent how little people actually in Congress know about tech when they interview Zuckerberg and people, and you're like, really? You guys didn't know that? Like the questions they ask are just like, it's crazy. So yeah, definitely there needs to be some people with more tech knowledge in Congress, especially when that's the economy we have now. We have a tech economy, definitely.
So it is. And in fact, so I'm a cybersecurity expert. 2 of my 3 companies have been in cybersecurity. I have often gone down to brief people in Congress.
Yeah.
And so I've seen firsthand the lack of knowledge and how it impacts our security and our safety and our economy.
Yeah. So everyone's kind of having to campaign in an interesting way because of COVID-19. But I saw that you have a really interesting thing you're doing. You're biking the district. You want to talk a little bit about that and why you decided to campaign in that way?
Yeah. So first of all, of course, I love getting out and talking to people and hearing from them. So I am an avid biker. I actually bike for my commute to my company when I can, when I'm not riding the commuter rail. And so I felt this was a great way to actually get some exercise, enjoy biking. And I've decided to bike all 34 towns and cities of our district. And I've actually done that. I've ridden nearly 500 miles, about 484 actually. I've visited 117 small family-owned businesses, and I've met over 500 people. And I've been in Attleboro actually 4 times. Been to the farmer's market a couple of times. Went to Bliss Creamery to get the chocolate pretzel salted caramel, or salted caramel with chocolate pretzel, which I love.
Sounds good.
It is good ice cream. And stopped by the Arts Museum and a bunch of other places. But it's a great opportunity to meet with the people. And I got to tell you, I'm actually going to be publishing a sort of a video montage of this. If you ever want to be inspired with our country, you just do something like that and talk to the people. I have met people who are so committed to the community and doing things for the community. Like I met this restaurateur in Taunton who actually let a competitor sell their food next to her in her parking lot next to her restaurant so they wouldn't go out of business. I mean, can you imagine that?
Yeah, that's great.
Great people.
Yeah. Wow. So, like you mentioned when you introduced yourself, you're all about jobs. That's the reason you ran. I know you have a very specific um, jobs and economic policies that you want to implement. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, like your idea on how to get these?
Sure.
I think you call it new collar jobs. So do you want to talk about how you want to get these new collar jobs happening in the Commonwealth and around the country?
Sure. So I would sort of amend what you said to say really what I'm really focused on is opportunity, right? And my father emigrated here with $100 in his pocket, and with a lot of hard work and risk taking, he built this great life for our family. But today, there are so many obstacles confronting our people that 50% of our people don't believe in the American dream anymore. So my focus is on how do we actually make the opportunity available to people? How do we remove obstacle after obstacle that they face to actually get a good job? So that's why I have a heavy focus on education. So what we have to do is not only create the jobs, we got to make sure that our people have the skills for the jobs in the 21st century, and that you don't have to go into debt $250,000 to try to get a lottery ticket to get a good job. So I focused my nonprofit work around things like bringing companies to work with Mass Bay Community College to create a 1-year pathway to cybersecurity jobs for people who can't afford a 4-year degree. Now, there are all sorts of jobs that are unfilled, like cybersecurity. There are 9,000 chronically unfilled jobs in Massachusetts alone because everyone's looking for 4-year college graduates. So if we can create these programs, which I will try to drive down in Washington, maybe even make no interest loans that are forgivable if people go through and get their degree and start working in industry with internships and apprenticeships on the other end of it, driven by the companies, incented by the government, we could actually get more people working with better jobs, more opportunity to people who don't see the opportunity today. And actually the government makes more money, right? Even if they forgive the loans, the payment of taxes in these jobs that are unfilled, and there are millions of these across the US. Cybersecurity, user design and experience, environmental tech, biotech, data analysts. There are tens of thousands of these in Massachusetts. Let's train our people to fill them. That's my focus on how to do it. And, you know, some of the things we do, invest in our community colleges like Bristol Community College and Mass Bay, 1 to 2 year programs, our vocational programs like Southeastern Regional Voc Tech. Invest money in those, expand them, incent businesses by giving them tax credits on investing in their training for their people, not just in their buying equipment, which is what they get today. Give them tax credits on investing in their people, and we can actually create this pipeline to fill these great jobs.
Yeah. So, would there be some kind of advisory panel or something to try to get community colleges, and I mean, even if some of them are 4-year degrees or whatever, like to get those programs started at the colleges? Like, how does
So,
that happen? How do you get those started?
so a bunch of them are already started. So Bristol Community College, Mass Bay, they already have cybersecurity programs, for example. And they actually, so this is where I think government plays the big role, is to be the catalyst. So the program that my nonprofit runs at Mass Bay, where we convinced State Street Bank and Harvard Pilgrim Health and Steward Health and a bunch of other companies to invest $500,000 to work on. It was catalyzed by a $62,000 grant from the state government, workforce development grant. Bristol Community College also got a small grant where they connected with Voc Tech, with Southeastern Regional, to create another pathway for people into cybersecurity. So I think that government has the most important role to bring businesses and schools together to solve this massive issue we have of an economy in the 21st century that's left so many people behind because they just don't have the skills to get the good jobs.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about on public education at the K through 12 or pre-K through 12 and
Sure.
your ideas there?
Yeah. So we got a lot of work to do around education. I think number one, what we have to do is start, again, eliminating the inequality in education between the wealthier towns and the towns that are not as wealthy, right? So my daughter was able to actually learn one of her courses in high school over the internet. Her teacher wasn't great, and that's fantastic. Well, our lower and middle income communities, they have horrible internet access in many cases, if people can even afford it. So to me, that's just like one indication of the obstacles that people who are not in the wealthy communities face around education. We've got to fix the infrastructure, get good internet, make it available to everyone, sort of like water and electricity. Make sure that the schools have good internet, that they have equipment, that they've got lab tables and can do lab experiments. I think then we need to, again, motivate companies to engage to create more experiential learning around math and science. Interest in math and science, which is driving the growth economy, drops 44% between 6th grade and 8th grade in public schools in Massachusetts. Well, the reason is because kids have all this dry learning and they don't have any hands-on. What does this really mean? Well, companies, tech companies in particular, are very open to doing this. I've convinced 15 of them to work with 6 Boston public schools to provide free this experiential learning for 6th graders. I actually just signed up Zeta in Fall River to do the same thing with Fall River schools, which we'll do once the kids fully get back to school. So we need to incent and drive our companies to engage. We need to invest heavily in math and science experiential learning in K through 12. Sort of like when we were behind in the space race. This was before I was born, but I read it in the history books, right? The government, the federal government, made a huge investment in math and science and education. We need to do the same in K through 12 so that our kids are prepared for this century's job opportunities, not last century's.
Yeah. Are you also on board with maybe expanding I don't know what they call them elsewhere, VOTech or whatever, but here they call them CTE programs and the career and technical ed. Are you on board with expanding those and making some newer ones that are more up to what the current jobs are?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, 100%. We have got to build these different paths, right? So just to sort of put a point on it, we've had this transformation for the past few decades. Some of us who are old enough, we actually have seen the transition. It's probably been reality for you, right? You're a bit younger than I am, right? It's just how the world is. But we've seen this transformation. Over this time period, our economy has created some job growth on the high end, if you can afford this $250,000 degree. It's eliminated 22% of the middle income, middle class jobs, and it's replaced them with low wage jobs. That's why our people are frustrated and angry and disenfranchised, because they don't see that connection. We have got to build other paths to get there other than go deeply into debt for $250,000 or more. There are so many people who can't afford that. They can't afford 4 years out of the workforce. And VOTech, what I would call vocational technical schools and community colleges and 1 to 2 year programs in our state schools, those are the ways that we do it. We've got to invest in those areas to help our people get economic mobility.
Yeah. Let's move on to the pandemic. So that's obviously the biggest thing happening right now is the pandemic, and Congress is kind of going back and forth with pandemic relief packages. If you're in Congress in January, what would you want to see happen then? And then also, like, what would you like to see happening right now? You know, what would you like Congress to do now?
Yeah. So the first thing I'd like Congress to do right now is do their job and work together to get things done. I mean, so there really were 2 reasons that I jumped to this race. One was this issue of no one addressing the economic divide, which creates so many problems for us and stops us from addressing other problems like immigration. Why can't we get immigration reform? People are afraid of losing their jobs. Why can't we get climate change legislation? Because people are afraid of losing their jobs. Okay, let's address it. The other reason is that I'm just sick and tired of the dysfunction, and I don't want my kids to inherit this from my generation, right? All they seem to do is yell. All I hear in this race generally is fight. I'm going to go down and fight. I'm going to fight. We need to bring our people together, right? Congress has got to figure out a way to work together. And the way you work together is you find a win for everyone around the table. Now, specifically, what should they do, right? Right now, with this economic disaster we're in, we have to print money. We have to. And we got to get that out to people so they can stay in their homes, stay in their apartments, clothe and feed their families. We've got to have a continued moratorium on evictions so that people aren't pushed out in the streets with this huge unemployment. And as you know, in our state, we've got the highest unemployment in the nation. And it's not just Fall River, it goes up all the way up to Easton and Attleboro. Easton has nearly 20% unemployment as well. So we need to, first of all, make sure that we get money to the people. Secondly, we have got to address how we can grow, because we're not going to print our way out of this mess. We had $1 trillion deficit last year. We're going to have 3 to 6 trillion this year. We've got to find a way to grow, to make $1 invested by the federal government turn into $5. And I would suggest you need someone who does that for a living, which is what I do as an entrepreneur. And you've got to have people down there to understand what not to do as well. You mentioned my bike rides. I visited over 100 small businesses. Half of them couldn't access PPP loans. Half. Yeah. Why? Because the government created restrictions that small businesses couldn't meet. They didn't have the right banking relationships. They didn't have long enough history of tax records. Well, we need people down in Washington who understand those things so that we don't stop our people from being able to succeed.
Yeah. So the other big issue that's been going on this summer is the Black Lives Matter issue and police reform and just racial justice in general. Where are you at on that? What would you like to see happening?
Sure. So first of all, I didn't share this in my background, but I'm a Boston born and raised. I was born in the state, raised in the state. I went to school at MIT in the state, raised my family here in the district over the past couple of decades. As someone who's trained at MIT, I believe in data. The data is clear. If anyone looks at the FBI's data, if you're stopped by police and you're not threatening them, you're 200% more likely to be shot if your skin color is black or brown. So it's clear that we have a systemic issue. And frankly, when I bike around the district and I stop and talk to policemen and women, they are engaged about this. I haven't had anyone not be engaged to say, we need to change. We need to change how we police. So I'm a firm believer that we need to take this opportunity and drive for real change. I support the Justice and Policing Act that was introduced by Senator Booker and Senator, hopefully soon to be Vice President Harris. And I support that 100%. We need better transparency. We need to demilitarize the police. We need to train our police to be more effective. We also need to do things like Mayor O'Connell is doing in Taunton. Our communities need to bring together our police with our community and look at the whole problem. If we fix housing problems, if we fix transportation problems, if we create more opportunity for people, all of those areas, if we deal with the opioid crisis effectively, that all will affect safety. So let's figure out how we spread the investment across all of those. That's something that we should be looking at. How we do that. I'm not one who runs around and says defund the police. I don't believe we should, but we should be looking at how we spread across all these areas. I'm a cybersecurity person. We believe prevent, detect, and respond. Policing is only part of that. Now, I do think that we got to be clear with ourselves that we cannot stop here. We can't have social justice without economic justice. And that gets back to what we were talking about earlier.
Yeah. So, Chris, what are your ideas on healthcare? I know you're not a Medicare for all guy. Do you want to talk a little bit about where you think nationally our healthcare system should go?
Sure. So we're the world's richest country. And to have millions of people who can't get access to quality healthcare is a total disgrace, right? I think that we need to make sure that we have universal healthcare without taking away the healthcare insurance that people might have privately that they like. In a recent debate, one of the candidates, who I don't think has ever worked in the private sector, said she didn't know anyone who liked their private insurance, which is crazy. I told her she needs to talk to some more people outside of academia and outside of government. People in my companies had great healthcare insurance, premium healthcare insurance. That's true in a lot of organizations. Now, there are many that don't. We need to make sure that everyone can get access to that quality healthcare insurance. And the way to do that, I believe, is by supporting Joe Biden's plan to expand Obamacare, make a strong safety net that is available to everyone, whether they can afford it or not, immediately kicking in if they're unemployed, so we don't have the issues that we had during this pandemic, so that everyone can get access to healthcare. We also have to go further to talk about accessibility to healthcare services. People in the less wealthy communities have a harder time accessing healthcare services. There's a lower density of community health centers. It's their transportation, public transportation capabilities make it difficult to access. There are food deserts, all of those areas as well. I think the federal government's got to drive incentives to organizations to change.
Yeah. So I know you you want to increase our investing in infrastructure, and maybe, I know, does that tie in at all with your jobs program that you want to create? Does it all kind of come together between, does that cross over at all?
It does.
Yeah.
So Dave, look, I talked about the deficit, right? Every dollar we spend, we've got to get return for. And the way to do that is make sure that we're focused on things that achieve what we want to and create jobs that can create good pay for people, lift up their families. They don't need the safety net. It will, in the end, it will be most effective for us. And frankly, it's the right thing to do. We can do this around climate change. I believe and agree with the concept of the Green New Deal. I don't know if you've read it. I've actually read it. It's actually not long. I recommend everyone read it. It's about a lot more than just dealing with climate change. But around climate change, I am in agreement that with the goals of the Green New Deal, but also that we can create new jobs. They're not going to appear magically, but we got to be smart about the investments. If we invest in public transportation, affordable housing, we will improve the quality of life for our people. At the same time, we'll reduce emissions, right? If someone uses public transportation instead of drives to work, they're going to reduce their emissions by 10%. With the wind farm that we hope to get off of our coast, the largest in the eastern US, every one of the wind turbines will be imported from Europe because we don't make them here. Well, why? Let's give incentives to companies to create those manufacturing jobs here. Let's build them here, and then we can put them out in the sun. This is going to be a growth industry. Let's invest in it. So I think those sort of things can enable us to achieve other aims that we need to get to in a way that creates jobs.
Yeah. Is broadband on a nationwide level, is that part of? Do you consider that part of infrastructure? And is that part of the idea? Okay.
Absolutely. I think we need to treat broadband like we treat water and electricity, right? This is an area where there's great inequality across the US. And now what are we doing? We're going to remote teaching, at least in the short term. We're going to telehealth and over the web health. Okay, well, now we're making it even harder for people in communities who can't afford good broadband to actually access vital services. So let's make it available to everyone, high quality, affordable, and accessible. I am 100% behind that.
Yeah. So, Chris, what committees would you want to be on if elected to Congress?
Yeah. So first of all, as a freshman congressperson going in, we don't always get the first choice, but I think it would be sort of smart for leadership to put me in, science, space, technology, right? In education and labor, where I have some experience, and maybe energy and commerce.
Yeah. So if there was, you might have an idea for this already. Are there any bills that you want to write as soon as you get to Congress, or that you've already started writing up some bills and you want to? And I know you said you've actually consulted with Congress members before, so maybe you've had your hands in writing bills before. But yeah, anything you want to write when you get there?
Yeah. So look, the obviously we got to deal with the current issues as of January, whoever goes down to Washington, relative to the pandemic. Now, hopefully by then we either have a vaccine or we're closer. Certainly we seem to be making good progress. So other than doing that, I think the key thing that I would focus on is around what you talked about, the new collar jobs, right? These jobs that have a technical component that are in every industry, healthcare, retail, distribution, publishing, not just in tech companies, to enable our people to get the skills necessary to fill them. So it would be to create this GI Bill-like Jobs Act to provide no interest loans for people to go to these 1 to 2 year programs in these specific disciplines where if they graduate and go into industry and give 120 hours of community service, hopefully working with K through 12 schools, we will forgive the loans. Give incentives as part of this to the companies, tax credits for investing in internships and apprenticeships, just like we give them tax credits for investing in capital equipment to encourage them to work with the schools, and then drive money to the schools to expand those programs. So this comprehensive act would be to try to begin to solve this huge issue of the economic divide.
So are those government subsidized loans from financial institution, or are those loans actually from the government?
I think that they're probably going to have to be loans from the government, but unlike the PPP loans where it's government backed, but they do have interest and people do expect them to pay back if the government doesn't forgive them. We could go that route as well. Honestly, whichever route I can use to get it through Congress, I will take, because the most important thing is to get those loans in place so that people can get the education they need.
We have 2 minutes left, but if you can squeeze in just any foreign policy priorities that you have.
Sure. So my father immigrated here, as I mentioned. He immigrated from the island of Cyprus, which is currently divided because it was invaded by Turkey in 1974. So I am very aware of the issues. The closest I can come to my grandfather's house is reaching through barbed wire and touching the walls. So I have a personal view of this, but it really fits with what we are as a country. We should be strongly supporting our democratic allies all around the world instead of cozying up with dictators, which is what we've been doing for the past few years. We've got to strengthen our alliances with people who have the same values and countries that have the same values. That will make us stronger, and that will make the world safer. In addition, relative to my own area, having worked in the internet for a couple of decades, seen the good and the bad, and worked in cybersecurity to protect, I know that the internet is the economic and military battlefield of the 21st century. We have to build collaboration between our government, our educational institutions, and our companies for a collaborative defense. This is something that I've done as a member of the Advanced Cybersecurity Center here in Boston on the board of directors. This is the way to combat hackers. They collaborate like crazy. We don't. So that's another key area that we have to focus on. How can we make the internet more secure, safe, private, and frankly, less full of false information?
All right. Thank you, Chris, so much for coming on. It was great talking to you.
Thanks, Dave. It was my pleasure. Happy to come back at some other time as well.
All right, sounds good. And thank you everyone for watching, and stay tuned for another episode of Headway.